Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm your host Adam, and today we're going to be talking about biohacking. This is going to be fun. So what is biohacking? Well, it kind of depends on who you talk to. So from a security standpoint, biohacking is when we try to find exploits and vulnerabilities and medical devices that are used to aid people, right? So that's like you're hacking, you're going to hack something that's affecting someone physically. And then there's biohacking when you talk about genetic engineering. So that's when people are like, oh, I'm going to lengthen my telomeres, or I'm going to use the CRISPR machine and genetically alter my DNA so I'm no longer lactose intolerant. So there's two kind of different forms of biohacking. One is you're actually hacking the body, and then the other one is when you're actually hacking kind of the medical devices in the bio world. I guess there's a third one, because in the body modification world, there's biohacking, and those people are modifying their bodies to do things they're not supposed to do. So like as an example, I mean, you can't see it, but in my finger, I actually have a magnet implanted into my finger. So I can feel electromagnetic fields in the air. So I get like a spidey sense. I can actually feel the vibrations of electromagnetic fields. And depending on how strong they are, the stronger the sensation. So I was biohacking when I had a magnet implanted in my finger. And there's a whole other world down that place. So biohacking with the CRISPR stuff, I'm not an expert in that world, so I can't talk too much there. But there's a great many of documentaries out there that talk about that, because that's a whole insane thing. And then if you're into biohacking, like making longevity, you want to live forever, then I would look into the whole telomere shortening stuff, because that's the whole kind of secret to life, apparently, is if you can stop the shortening of your telomeres or even lengthen your telomeres, it'll actually increase your lifespan. Obviously, I'm not an expert in that, but if you're into it, check it out. So let's talk about biohacking with regards to what I saw at the Biohacking Village at DefCon. So every year at DefCon, they have the Biohacking Village, which is when a bunch of medical device manufacturers show up and they basically put their devices out there and say, hey, here it is. Here's your USB or serial port, whatever. Connect and see what you can do. And the idea is they even make you sign a waiver. Like, I don't know how that's going to hold up, because I don't think anyone actually fills out their real name. But they make you sign a waiver saying, hey, if you find any vulnerabilities, or if you find something out that you will let them know right away, and you will not use it for malicious intent or whatever. You're literally doing this just so you can help them secure and harden their devices. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because, I mean, I really don't know. I don't think I've ever met a single hacker or person that's, even black hat, hardcore black hat, nefarious hackers that are actively going out trying to hurt people. For me, it's always been people that stem from the same thing, which is most of the time they just want to see if they can do it, right? They just be like, oh my gosh, look what I did. I got into this thing that you said I couldn't get into. Ha ha ha. To me, that's the root of all hacking. So when it comes to biohacking devices, it's pretty interesting, because I remember it was like the late 90s. The US passed a law that said if you were to hack anything that would actually cause physical harm to a person, that you could get like life in prison or something. It was like the term in prison was longer than murder. That's all I remember, being like, what? Because everyone was freaking out about hackers back then, because they didn't understand it. Everyone was scared. And there just really wasn't, the common knowledge that there is today of what's possible and not possible. So, but back then I was like, well, that's crazy. Like, how could you hack a computer and actually affect someone? Well, this is how. Because when you work with companies that make, like, let's say infusion pumps or things along those lines, and they're regulated, it's like, you scan these pumps and it says, okay, I'm going to hook up morphine to this pump, and they're only supposed to get it every so often. If some malicious intent person, right, it's a bad actor, were to hack that infusion device and kick it on to pump morphine into their blood, a shit ton of it, well, it could kill the person. So obviously that's bad. So the medical device areas is hugely monitored and regulated by like the FDA and a bunch of other hardcore regulations to ensure that these things go under strict, very, very stringent testing and vulnerability tests, and to prove out that there's, to the best of anyone's knowledge, there's nothing even remotely close of a way to get into this stuff. Obviously, it doesn't mean it's foolproof, but it means that you've done enough due diligence to say, hey, look, this is, to the best of our knowledge and the best of everyone else's knowledge that we've gone to, this thing is secure. So in the Biohacking Village, there's all these cool devices you can play with. A lot of the stuff I had no idea what it was, because it's not really my specialty, but I just started getting into it recently. So it was really cool to see a lot of these companies working with hackers to try to harden their devices and make them better and stronger. Because obviously you don't want this stuff to be vulnerable. If I'm in a hospital or my kid's in a hospital, I absolutely want to be 100% sure that every electronic device that's hooked up to a human person is not being messed with by someone. I mean, in my mind, everything should be completely air gapped. There should be no way to reach these devices via Wi-Fi. You know, I mean, like it's crazy out there. So now, has this happened, or how do you patch them? Well, depends on the device. Some hardware devices, because of their nature, they don't connect to networks, right? So they are air gapped. In which case, if the vulnerability is found, what that means is all the devices have to be recalled. Maybe either a new firmware has to be uploaded, or a whole new, chipset could have to be put in, or a whole new board could have to be put in. So it could be anything from a new firmware has to be uploaded to the entire device has to be replaced, depending on the level of the vulnerability. So it could be pretty crazy. Now, the craziest one that I've heard was actually stemmed from a episode of Homeland. So in an episode of Homeland, I think it was like the vice president or something had a pacemaker, and then some foreign attacker compromised the pacemaker and basically just made it go off and gave the guy a heart attack and killed him. And that set off a company where they actually did make pacemakers. It was like, holy shit, is that possible? We should really figure this out. And they wound up looking into their devices and finding out like, hey, we actually need to patch these things. Now, how do you patch a pacemaker? Well, you can't upload new firmware. So what that means is literally all the people that have the affected pacemakers would have to go under the knife, get surgery, and have them actually removed with the upgraded ones. So when you're talking about biohacking some critical life enabling devices, it could mean that when you need to upgrade or patch them, that you actually have to undergo surgery and have them physically removed or replaced. That's crazy. So when I think about blockchain development and I'm bummed that I can't update the code on the blockchain, imagine having to have your open heart surgery because a vulnerability was found in your pacemaker. So yeah, so biohacking has a bunch of different meanings out there, but I think the one when it comes down to medical devices and how they interact with people and safety of people, I think is really cool. And I think a lot more people should be involved in this just because it's something I don't think gets a lot of attention. And I don't mean from the negative way. I mean, obviously from the protective way, and just thinking of like how we can make this stuff more secure. Like how are we making other forms of network devices and other things like that, more hardened and less vulnerable. Well, let's start working that stuff into the medical device, world, because that's when we can really affect and save people's lives from malicious intent and malicious actors there, or just a bug gets out, right? Like some virus were to somehow get into these things, it could do it unintentionally, and we want to prevent that as well. So in the security space, we're trying to stay one step ahead of all the attackers all the time and just bugs and vulnerabilities. This is just a whole nother wing of stuff to check out for. So if you're into biohacking of any shape and form, I'd love to hear what you guys are doing. You can hit me up, adam@nidus.com, or you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at NidusIAM, NYEDISIAM, and you can check us out there. Hit me up. I'd love to hear your stories. I'll see you guys around. Later.